And I'm
Yeah.
on this podcast, and this girl just flat out to the agreement of like every other person on the podcast, and like the audience is just like, yeah, I don't really like uncut dicks because I just think they're filthy.
But I
And I'm
want to
like,
pivot to something a little bit different. But actually, what we started out on originally. But you felt like because of the way gender roles are set up, as a result of that, that plays into a lot of the issues that we have in terms of consent. Correct? You said just to be sure, because I asked you how we can fix consent, and you kind of went into this dating parameters of how like men are meant to ask women all the time. That was one of your things. What were some of the other things that you think contributes to our issues with being able to have clear and concise consent and things like that?
I mean, there's so many different things. I would say that like, so one was men being expected to ask first on everything is probably bad. I think that the ownership or entitlement that men feel to women's bodies sometimes feels like a little strange. Like, here's a really good example of this. I can say specifically to Twitch, every single person can benefit from a woman's nudity except for that actual woman before people start to call them sluts and like go crazy about it. So as an example of this, like I can play video games that have female sex scenes in them, male female sex scenes in them, and everybody is like, PogChamp, this is awesome, like The Witcher, Cyberpunk, you can fuck people, this is so sick, and everybody's cool with it. But if you were to take the very same woman from one of those sex scenes and then she was to do a stream on Twitch, now it's like, what the fuck, you fucking whore, what are you doing out here? This is disgusting, what's wrong with you, right? Where like it seems like every party or every person is able to benefit from or enjoy like those kind of sex acts, but when the woman herself is in charge, like, hold on, well, fuck you, I don't think you're allowed to do this, you know? So I think we have like a lot of weird ideas in our head about like who has like the ownership over like women's sexuality. You still see a lot of, in my opinion, very fucking weird ownership over like the sexualness of your daughter, where, you know, fathers will say things like, you know, like, oh, I'm not gonna let my daughter be with a guy like that. And it's like, that's really fucking weird how you're so obsessed with who your daughter is dating or whatever. Like, I think that's kind of creepy. But that's still like pretty normalized in a lot of parts of the country. So that part is
Well,
one thing. Yeah, go for it.
I wanted to push back. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like mothers are quite involved in their sons' dating lives in regards to who they're dating. Do you feel like that comes from a very different place?
I don't feel like it's the same type of guardianship at all. Like, I don't feel like, and a lot of this might be subjective. You feel free to disagree if you feel like you have different experiences. I feel like you could view your daughter as getting like ruined by certain types of relationships, especially sexual ones, but we don't really feel the same way about like boys or men. Where like if you date like the wrong type of person, like, you know, having sex with this many people can like ruin you or make you kind of like worth less, or you're compromising yourself. Like, you know, like we tell our sons to be careful, but like for our daughters, it's like, you know, this is like actually disgusting bad behavior that you can engage in. I think there's a difference there, is how I would view it.
There's definitely a difference, but I think the difference are justified in regards to some of the risks that daughters or women will have in a dating situation. You know, like if your daughter's dating the wrong dude, and you see it happening in front of you, aside from like some of the extremes would be abuse or whatever, all that stuff. I mean, you have to consider like getting somebody pregnant. You know, if your daughter gets pregnant, especially with the wrong dude, like, yeah, of course, that's gonna have way worse implications. As it's often the men who run out on the women rather than the women who run out on the men. So she will be left stuck with a baby in a bad situation. So I think a lot of those protectiveness is very justified in regards to just acknowledging like, yo, women who date with the wrong people, whether it be violence, whether it be finances, whether it be children and stuff like that, their risks are way higher.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I want to believe you, and then in other ways, I'm not sure how much of this ends up becoming like a cope for the parent, because like we say things like that, but it's like, so like if our primary concern was like, you know, them getting pregnant, well then the correct response would be like, hey, like we need to do something about birth control. But that's not usually what it is, right? It's usually a little bit more controlling than that. It feels like it's a little bit more sexually oriented than just like pure outcome oriented. But again, I'm from Nebraska, like that might be my experience in hearing things. I also went to private school.
I just want to.
Yeah, go for
I
it.
want to. I just want to understand, like, when you say it's more sexually oriented, what do you mean? Like, how is that control more sex focused?
Because
In regards to like allowing their daughters to just fuck people versus their sons who like, you could fuck anyone, but then their daughters like, be a good girl. Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, kind of like that thing. It's like that wink, wink, nudge, nudge from like a parent or whatever, like in terms of like their son's sexual behavior and exploration. But for a girl, it's like gross and not okay. Or
Right.
like the person's value is more tied into like, and then like more broadly speaking culturally, right? You even have jokes where it's like a lock that's opened by any key is a shitty lock, but a key that can open any lock is a master key, you know, like where the promiscuous dicks are awesome, but the promiscuous vaginas are just like, you know, stretched out sluts, you know, like that type of idea I think is still pretty pervasive in society.
Okay, I would concede on that point in regards to those differences there, and maybe there are better solutions in regards to not necessarily being controlling of the sex life, but I think in general, if you asked me as a parent would I be more protective of my son than my daughter? I'd probably say no. I'd probably be more protective of my daughter, just recognizing the reality of the world that we live in, right? Like,
Yeah, but I think that like, and a lot of this stuff is cyclical, like it feeds back into itself. So like I wouldn't necessarily say somebody's wrong there, but like that even from the very start, right? That type of modeling where our sons are free to kind of explore and do what they want and be their own men in the world, and daughters need to be like a little bit more protected and cherished more, like that will feed into their view later in life where it's like, okay, well, I'm looking for a partner. I just need somebody that earns more than me, that's better than me, that can take care of me, that's going to make the first move and kind of take control of me, because that's like the modeling that I've been given for my entire life too. And again, I'm not saying that like it's wrong as a parent to do that, because all of these things play into each other. But like I can see how like a lot of this feeds into itself and sets itself up to play out the same way in the future.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's hard to. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg. Is it like the fact that society's just women are just more vulnerable as a result of like just living within groups, and that's inherent, and so therefore the resulting behavior is always going to be there? Or is the resulting behavior making us more protective, which is making us go down certain rabbit holes, which is perpetuating certain ideas? It's hard to tell which one comes before the other.
Yeah, a really good example I can give of this is like makeup and the crazy filtering that's going on Instagram these days. I don't know if like if an average man even knows what an average woman looks like even anymore. Like there are so many guys where you show them pictures of women. It's like, oh, I like this woman who's wearing no makeup, and it's like, dog, she has fucking makeup on. Like you're crazy. You don't even know what an old person looks like anymore, right? And I would say that like men and women both feed into this. But for me to tell a woman like, listen, bro, you got to stop with all this shit, I'm essentially asking her to martyr herself. Because if she does stop with the crazy filtering and the makeup, well, now she's going to get made fun of on social media, and people are going to roast her saying like, oh my God, you look sick. You look disgusting. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you, right? And it's the same thing with the father-daughter example. If I'm like, hey, listen, you need to give your daughter like more freedom, dude. Like, you're way too overpossessive. Like, this is crazy. And the dad's like, okay, fine, I'll let her explore more when she wants. And if she does that and then like gets raped, then it's like, oh, well, fuck you. You just fucked me. Like, what the fuck? Why did I do this? I fucked up, So these are all like, I'm trying to be careful of this. I know that like, no matter what I say, people are always going to hate me because I say I'm either an incel or a hardcore feminist. But I really do try to be careful when I present these. There's always two sides to all of these. None of this is easy. Accomplishing a world where all women are treated equally, I don't even know that's possible in terms of like the equal exchange and everything. But like none of this is easy. And I don't mean to present any of it as like, oh, we just have to do this and like everything will be fixed. Like I don't agree with that, obviously. It's way more complicated than that.
Yeah, I think it comes down to how much security are you willing to give up for freedom.
Sure.
And one could believe that a lot of these security measures are put in place because of misogyny or because of like terrible ideas. But then like there's a good measure of it that's like, no, the world is just a bit of a fucked up place for ladies. And like, I don't know what else to do other than to put more burden on her, which is to some degree definitely unfair, but also I could understand what's necessary. But yeah, it's a tough discussion. It's a very tough discussion. Like you said, there is no one answer. I do agree with you that you can't just be like, well, you got to protect women. It's just that. Well, it's like, yeah, but you're also stifling her and you're priming her mindset to always view not only the world as necessarily hostile, but also to look for the things that she got from her family in her mates as well. And so that always going to be a perpetual cycle of like, I need it to be bigger. I need him to be taller because I need him to protect me. I'm like, when's the last time you got attacked, lady? Like, what are you expecting your mate to do? Like, fend off muggers or some shit? Like, what's going on? But it's so primed in us because of how we're raised in an environment. Like, I've never thought of like having a girl who's going to protect me. You know what I mean?
Which is interesting. Yeah.
Even though men have just as many odds of like being attacked as a lady, like just in terms of like physical violence in regards to that. Like,
yeah, and then that leads into other weird areas too when we push that dichotomy. So there's a couple of like really funny videos online. I say funny, it's more sad, I guess, where you have like, if you are in public and you start like hitting a woman, dude, you're gonna get stopped 9 out of 10 times or 10 out of 10 times. Like no one is gonna like, people are gonna be like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Bro, I don't even want to go down this road.
Exactly.
Don't even bring it down this road. Like the amount of times that I've talked about, like I don't know if you've had this in your dating experiences, but the amount of times, like, listen, don't put your hands on women. That's a simple idea. Cool. The amount of times I've been in dating experiences and I've watched that, like, women's stimuli to like a frustrating situation or whatever is just like physical reactions has like boggled my mind. Like I've watched women be frustrated and just like slap my shoulder or like slap my back. I'm like, where did that come from? Like, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I would never think, but I also know the consequences of violence. Like you can go out to a club and slap a dude in the face and nothing's going to happen to you. But I know what it means if I slap, whether it be a man or a woman, I know what happens. I would never think of responding that way. And it's just been one of my biggest pet peeves because I bring it up and people are like, oh, you're being an incel. Why are you bringing it up? It's not that big of a deal. But I'm like, do you not recognize how these women who engage in this kind of behavior also prime young children when they exemplify this behavior in front of them. Like if you show your kid that whenever you're frustrated, you hit somebody, whether it be light or aggressive, like it's a bad lesson and it's something that we perpetually do. I don't know. It's just
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, obviously.
I
Yeah,
get triggered by this so
yeah,
much.
I completely agree. And so I was a victim of like pretty hardcore domestic abuse. Me and my my kid's mom had crazy living together situations. I was a stick back then. I weighed 105 pounds. She was like 145. So she was like, compared to me, she was a big person. I had to call the police 3 times to get her removed from the house. Every single time the cops showed up, they blamed me for the altercation. I was like, this is bullshit. And I just stopped calling. I just started taking pictures of like my fucking wounds instead. I was like, if I have to go to court, then we'll do this. But like, yeah, that shit like fucking blew my mind. Like they'd show me like, okay, well, because as soon as I'd be like, hey, like my my girlfriend at the time, she's here, like I'm getting attacked. Blah, blah. It's like, okay, well, like what did you do to set her off? Like, what kind of fighting are you guys doing? Like, what did you say to her? Did you cheat on her? Did you blah, blah? And it's like, no, wait, what the fuck? Like I called you guys here to help me. What the fuck is going on? Why am I getting fucking grilled on this? What the fuck? Whereas if the roles were reversed, I feel like I would have been fucking arrested and taken out fucking instantly. But yeah, I don't know. That always bothered the fuck out of me.
Bro, that shit like literally drove me towards like red pill stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I remember being so jaded, and like anytime I brought it up, people would just gaslight the fuck out of me. And the only people I remember talking about like the fucking annoying shit that women would do were like red pill.
Red
dudes.
pill,
I'm like,
yeah.
So then I would go like that's like the one thing that people never want to acknowledge about that community. Like they are the only group of people who I remember at a young age would ever talk about the stuff that women do that I would encounter in my life. So of course I identified with them because I'm like nobody else is talking about like the shit that I'm going through. And then obviously with time I got to see like some of the more toxic aspects of that community. But that's stuff that not only never gets talked about, but is also super confusing. Because I would remember like being 19 and having women like grope my junk, and I'm like, oh, this is just okay. So in my head I was like, cool. But then I would also hear online every day, a man groped me and it was fucked up, and I was like, huh? And then sometimes I would hear it from like women who self-identify as feminists and who believed in the idea of consent and stuff like that, and they got a little bit of liquor in them, and they were like completely fucked up. And I just remember being like so confused with the messaging, because it wasn't just the fact that like one individual did that, it was also the fact that if I would bring it up in conversations where these things should be dealt with and like addressed, it wouldn't be. So then I was like really thrown off by the whole messaging of like physical boundaries. I was like, what does that even mean? I was just confused as a man for sure.
Yeah, something that I try to focus on a lot is so like if we have like two sides to like types of claims we can make, we can talk about things that like describing the world as it is, and then describing things that we should do. I find that a lot of people that are more like socially liberal or left-leaning or whatever have a really hard time at just acknowledging certain realities of the world. And I think that hurts their argument a ton. And I think that's why you do get a lot of like very red-pilled people that will come out and kind of like basically get a bunch of people into these camps, because a lot of people that are more left-leaning social like are not willing to acknowledge certain things. Or they'll like saddle men with 100% of the blame. Or they'll say things like, oh, like, women never date men because of their income. The problem is you're just a nice guy incel. It's like, bullshit, dude. Women will fuck guys for their money all the fucking time. Why? And the problem is that when you're on the left and you lie about things like that, everybody looks at you and is like, wait, what the fuck? Like, I'm not going to believe anything you say if you're not going to acknowledge like things that I personally know are fucking true. And that drives me fucking crazy when people on the left are not willing to like say like, okay, listen, I disagree with everything the red pill guy is telling you to do, but a lot of what he brings up is true. Like there are ways that people select, sex partners or whatever, or girlfriend, boyfriend or whatever. Like some of these things are true, but like we should change the way that we view it, not just give into it completely,
Yeah. That was a tough thing for me for a while, because as I started talking about this stuff, the people were like, I would watch my chat or like the comments below, right? And I would see how much anger there was. People were kind of like, how do you feel about fostering so much like incel stuff? I'm like, if you listen to what I said, it wasn't that extreme. And people are like, yeah, I agree, but what are you fostering? I'm like, it's not me that's fostering that. It's the fact that the world has never addressed what these guys are going through. The fact that you can get on The View and laugh about some dudes getting his dick getting
chopped off in a fucking sink. Yeah, holy shit.
Like, you could talk about that and it's open and it's acceptable.
Oh man,
I'm not driving people towards like extremism. The world has been driving them towards that, and I just resonated with some of their struggles and they identified with me. That's what happened. I didn't have to say much. If you say anything like, hey man, sometimes women do some crazy stuff. Dudes will get in the comments like, women ain't shit, women are whores. I'm like, bro, I didn't say all that.
I do. I have the exact same fucking problem because I have to be so fucking careful with what I say because you do draw that crowd really quickly. Like for me personally, I don't really think that sexual content should be on Twitch. That's just not something that I'm comfortable with. I don't think it should be. But like I'll say some shit like I'll tweet out like I don't really think Twitch should be a platform for sexual content. And I'll get all these people I mentioned like, dude, fuck these whores wearing fucking these like tank top shit. Like, whoa, that's not what I was talking about. I'm not talking about a girl playing Call of Duty in a fucking tank top showing some cleavage. Like that is way far away. And you have to be so careful on like because that's why I said at the beginning multiple times, like depending on who you are when you listen to me, I'm either like a hardcore lib cuck simp or I'm like an insane fucking degenerate Nazi incel. Like people go crazy on that. I remember I was on a late night podcast a few months ago, and you think that female genital mutilation is wrong, right? I assume you do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty obvious one.
So we hear about that.
Yeah, and we probably shouldn't like shame women over having like big labia or different types of vaginas, right? I think everybody agrees with this. It's like stuff we shouldn't do today. And I'm on this podcast, and this girl just flat out to the agreement of like every other person on the podcast, and like the audience is just like, yeah, you know, I don't really like uncut dicks because I just think they're filthy. And I'm like, wait, what the fuck? Like, hold on. If I were to ever make an equivalent comment about your vagina, like I don't like girls with big lips because I think they look like fucking Dumbo, right? I would get destroyed. I would get absolutely, rightfully so, I would get ass busted for that comment. But like, she made that comment, and then other guys on the podcast too were defending her. And I'm like, dude, you're like literally defending, like, I don't know, that type of shit is just super fucked up to me. The double standards there drive me crazy.
And I get so tired of like bringing it up because every time you try to bring it up, even like in a very fair and modest way, which seems very equal, they look at you like, oh, you're an incel. That's like the first like way they denigrate anything that you have to say in regards. And
I appreciate that, Destiny.
All right, bye. Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.